Hello everyone, GoldenNova here, and it's time for another custom card showcase video. Every month, I ask my patrons to craft some custom cards based on a particular theme, and I pick the ones I found most interesting to share with all of you. And fittingly, to go along with the changing of the seasons, this month's topic is spring. Submissions can be anything from cards that relate to spring itself, have mechanics that symbolize rebirth and the flourishing of nature. I even let literal springs be viable. So get ready to breathe in that nice floral breeze, because it's time for the March 2025 Custom Card Showcase. Today's episode is possible thanks to viewers like you, as well as my patrons. If you like what I do here, I would super appreciate it if you'd subscribe to help us reach another wonderful milestone video. And if you want to support me directly while getting some awesome benefits, check out the link to my Patreon in the description below. Part 1. Cloudians. First up, we have a submission from Double, who has decided to use the prompt as an excuse to bring in some cloud cover. It may be a little early, after all, it's April showers that bring May flowers, but I don't know when else they were going to get the chance, so let's see if Adrian Gecko's new support can breathe some new life into the theme. Cloudian Solitary Fog King is a level 7 water fairy monster with 0 attack and defense, and you can send a Cloudian card from your hand and one from your deck to the graveyard to special summon this card from your hand or grave. And if you do, you can make this card's original attack become the combined original attack of the sent monsters. At the start of the damage step, if this card battles a monster with a counter, banish that monster. And if you do, burn your opponent for 4,000 damage. And if a monster you control battles, your opponent can't activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step, also you take no battle damage from that battle. That's right, we're finally bringing Fog King into the fold, and thankfully we've left behind the Tribute Floodgate for some more interesting effects. It comes with a Machina Fortress style summon effect, right down to how you can use itself to fulfill the condition if it started out in your hand, though this does mean it won't be adding any to the attack boost. The burn effect seems pretty situational, but for 4,000 damage it better be. Good luck out there, Spellcaster Duelists, you're gonna need it. The last effect is pretty goofy, effectively turning all of our monsters into armades while preventing battle damage, though doesn't actually give battle destruction protection. Though that's probably because it's meant to combo with actual Cloudians that have that natively. And you know what that means, right? We no longer have to play Sanctuary in the sky to keep our life points safe, thank God. Cloudian Contrail is a level 4 water fairy monster with 1,000 attack and 0 defense, and you can send a Cloudian card from your hand or field to the grave to special summon this card from your hand. It can't be destroyed by battle, but does destroy itself if it's ever in face-up defense position, which, you know, is usual Cloudian nonsense. And if this card is normal or special summoned, you place a fog counter on it for each Cloudian monster on the field. You can also target a monster on the field to add a Cloudian monster from your deck to your hand, then remove 2 fog counters from that target, and you can use this effect up to twice per turn, because, you know, those contrail things have 2 trails on them. Anyway, this card is beyond nifty, turning our fog counters into actual cards we can combo with. And if we have enough fog counters around, we can even get 2 searches. How fancy. In fact, this card might be a bit too good. Like there's some kind of conspiracy going around to make Cloudians better or something. Cloudian Volcano Ash is a level 4 water fiend monster with 1,000 attack and 0 defense, with the usual Cloudian effects, insofar as the battle destruction protection and defense position self-destruction. It can target one other card on the field and destroy both it and this card, and if you do, the zones they were in can't be used until the end of the next turn. If this card is banished, you can special summon a Cloudian monster with 1,000 or less attack from your deck, and if you do, place up to 2 fog counters on face-up monsters on the field, distributed as you wish. This was pitched as a combo Volcanic card, but eventually turned into this, and I still think it lands. It's got Destruction, which is pretty on brand for Volcanic, and while the zone denial doesn't show up in any of them, I can see an area full of volcanic smog not being the most comfortable to deal with. The banishing also comes up in relation to Cloudian Storm Dragon, because it needs to banish for its own summon. This way you get an additional Cloudian into rotation, and Storm Dragon can even fill it up with an additional fog counter to make it even more effective. Looking at you, Altus. I swear, half the reason this theme doesn't get any support is because of this big chungus. Cloudian Tailwind is a continuous spell card that you can only control a single copy of. Monsters you control gain 500 attack for each fog counter on them, and it also allows you to activate the effects of your monsters with Cloudian in their original name as quick effects, as long as those effects target, but if you do, you add an additional effect to them that makes it so you can't activate that face-up card's effect again for the rest of the turn. And if this card is sent to the grave, add a card with an effect that places fog counters from your deck or grave to your hand. Yeah, you liked how big Nimbus Man can be? Well, now they can all do it. Getting a search when this card is sent to the grave is pretty nice, but the premium selling point is that it's also an Orcust Babel, an outrageous addition to any theme. The targeting thing is a bit clunky, but I was told it was to avoid using Altis during our opponent's turn to hand rip the card they drew, which I think is more than fair. It even slaps a retroactive once per turn on those quick effects, so they can't be too oppressive during your opponent's turn, picking off monsters in back row like there's no tomorrow. Though, I'll be real with you, if they have the counters to pull it off, I say let them. Cloudians have been the laughingstock of this game since they came out all the way back in GX. We can let them be juiced up Tridents at least a little bit. Cloudian Headwind is a continuous spell card that you can only control a single copy of. While you control a Cloudian monster, monsters your opponent controls with at least 2 fog counters on them have their name changed to Cloudian Fog, and their effects are negated. Once per chain, if any number of effect monsters with a level are normal or special summoned to your opponent's field, you can choose up to 1 face-up monster on the field for every 2 levels that summoned monster has on the field, and place a fog counter on each of the chosen monsters. And if this card is sent to the grave, add a Cloudian card from your deck to your hand, except a copy of this card. I really like this card. While many of our Cloudians only care about the fog counters on themselves because they can't reach out and use them from other cards, that didn't stop Cloudian Squall from doing it. And that still ends up interacting with a number of effects, most notably Nimbus Man. And now, doing this counts as interaction. It even changes the name of those monsters, so any archetypal synergy they benefit from, it's out the window. Because there's so much fog around them that they're unrecognizable. It's actually a really clever idea. And because this card keeps generating more fog counters, your opponent is only a couple summons away from things getting really hairy for him. And then, you know, this also comes with a search when it hits the graveyard. This all sounds pretty powerful, but like I said, Cloudians deserve it. But specifically Cloudians. Adrian Gecko abandoned them to play Exodia Turbo, and he doesn't get the Jeff Leonard pass. Overall, I think there are some nifty additions to the theme here. They don't really replace the old playstyle, but do give it new options in a flavorful way. And personally, it's my favorite kind of approach to making legacy support. Good job. Part 2. Gearsprings. Kernulik was reminded Gimmick Puppet Explained existed and that there was a Gearspring monster in that video. And true to my conditions for this month's submissions, literal springs are valid. So now they've expanded one card into a whole theme. Gearspring Totem is a level 8 Dark Machine monster with 100 attack and defense, and you can discard this card and one other card to add 2 Gearspring cards with different names from your deck to your hand, except a copy of this card. During your main phase, you can make all machine-type monsters with an original level you control become level 8, but this card must be in the grave to activate and resolve this effect. This makes for a pretty effective starter. You turn any 2 of your cards into more Gearsprings, and while in the grave, you have a way to play rank 8s in any machine deck. It doesn't really come with any restrictions, mind you, so you could play this in decks like Infinitrack, Machina. I'd even enjoy a spat of it in Deskbots if Totem was real. That being said, having to remain in the graveyard is a bit of a detriment. Always funny when Magnamud is a negate on top of a search. Gearspring Doll is a level 8 Dark Machine monster with 100 attack and defense, and if your opponent controls any number of monsters with 0 attack, something you can force pretty easily with the original Gearspring Spirits effect, you can target a level 8 machine-type monster in your grave and special summon both that target and this card from your hand. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, except machine monsters. And an Xyz monster whose original type is machine and has this card as Xyz material gains this effect. This card deals piercing battle damage. It's a pretty straightforward card, but very useful. If you do focus on playing Gearspring Spirit, this makes for a fantastic inclusion in Gimmick Puppets as a way to get another big body onto the board. And it doesn't negate the effect of the card that you summon, so if it's got a rowdy one, you've got access to it again. And at the end of the day, the Xyz monster you make, presumably you're under the summon restriction, is gonna have piercing damage, so your opponent's life points will hardly ever be safe, especially with the monster we're about to talk about. This card's a real doll in that way. Gearspring on Myoji is a rank 8 Dark Machine Xyz monster with 100 attack and defense, requiring 2 or more level 8 monsters as material. This card can make a second attack during each battle phase, and it gains 300 attack for each Xyz material attached to it. As a quick effect, once per turn, you can target a monster your opponent controls with a lower attack than this card has, and attach it to this card as material. Then, special summon a Rust token to your opponent's field, which is a level 8 Dark Machine monster with 0 attack and defense. And if this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can detach a material from this card to inflict damage to your opponent equal to the battle damage this card inflicted, and you can use this effect up to twice per turn, matching up with its 2 attacks per turn. So the bad news is that its stats aren't going to be very good starting out. With the base amount of material, it'll only get to 700 attack, so you're really gonna have to lean into Spirit to reduce an opponent's attack to get that scoop. Heck, even if you manage to get 6 machines onto the board, even using the extra monster zone, and make them all level 8 with Totem's effect, we don't even break 2000 attack. Giving our opponent a token is kind of funny, even though our piercing from Doll makes whatever position we summon it in pretty moot, but the real deal is the effect that lets you detach a material to basically deal double damage. So while it has some problems all by itself, combine on Myoji with some worthwhile attack boosting effects, and you're looking at a pain train. Ah, wait, no, trains are more of a rank 10 thing. Shoot, what other form of public transportation can we represent with rank 8s? We'll get back to this later. Gearspring Miraculous Malfunction is a continuous spell card that, if an Xyz machine monster you control would inflict effect damage to your opponent, you can negate that damage and destroy a card your opponent controls for every 1000 damage that would have been inflicted by that effect. And if an Xyz machine monster you control would inflict effect damage to your opponent while this card is in the graveyard, you can add it to your hand. You can only use one effect of this card per turn, and only once per turn. This one is... I don't know, I'm not really here for it. We've already done the math, and getting a second pop off of this is going to be a struggle. Heck, getting one pop is more of an effort than it's probably worth. Thankfully, this does work with Machine Xyz monsters in general, so you could combine this with a card like Gustav Max, and instead of dealing 2000 damage, you pop 2 cards. But I don't know, most of these cards are interesting, but I think this one is a bit of a misfire, due partially to the fact that all of our monsters are base 100 attack and defense, so that, you know, I guess Malfunction was right, never mind the no notes. Gearspring Haunting Curse is a continuous trap card that, once per turn, you can target a monster your opponent controls and its attack and defense becomes 0. Also, it has its effects negated until the end of the turn, but you must control a face-up Gearspring monster to activate and resolve this effect, and your opponent can't activate cards or effects during the battle phase while you control a Machine Xyz monster. Now this is a card. Quick effect negation and stat reduction as long as you have a Gearspring? Ugh, beautiful. Oh, and it shuts your opponent out of the game during the battle phase. That is probably going to get you a stink eye or 2 during games, but it is undeniably effective. And as a quick effect, you're going to get to do this at the most annoying times. And really, when you're playing a deck who loves to mess with your opponent's battle stats, it seems pretty on brand, so it gets a pass from me. This group of cards I feel a bit more mixed on. The lack of history from the card pool meant we had a chance to solidify an identity for Gearsprings, but it seems we're content to do all the stuff that Gimmick Puppet kinda does, just with a little bit of stat reduction. That's not terrible overall, good support is good support after all, but it does feel like we're living under the shadow of another archetype. Part 3. Crowned. Here's a little something to spice things up, an original cast of cards. Cool Trainer Dark brought in a bit of a twist on the spirit of Rebirth, a dark-faced spirit that reanimates creatures of the forest as zombies. So, you know, think Vernisylph, but instead of shopping at Forever 21, they're looking for fishnet gloves over at the Hot Topic. Lotus Crowned Cayman is a level 3 water zombie monster with 1300 attack and 1500 defense, and you can target 2 zombie monsters you control, and the level of one becomes the level of the other until the end of the turn. During the end phase, if this card is in your grave, you can banish another zombie monster from your grave to special summon this card. So for those who enjoy using their rotting corpses for the bases of their Xyz monsters, Cayman helps take disparate levels and levels them out. Reviving during the end phase is pretty nifty as well, though you should probably wait until the end of your opponent's turn. 1500 defense isn't going to be very good at sticking around during your opponent's push. Though hey, maybe having an extra blocker could be worth it. But personally, I would save this alligator for later. Daffodil Crowned Stag is a level 4 Earth Zombie Tuner monster with 1800 attack and 1400 defense, and when using this card as material for a Synchro summon, if the other materials used for that summon are zombie monsters, you can treat this card as a non-tuner. You can send a card from your hand to the grave to increase or decrease this card's level by 1, and if a card your opponent controls is banished, you can special summon this card from your hand or grave. Hell yeah, malleable tuner status, you'll love to see it. On top of an adjustable level too, so you could use this in all kinds of synchro recipes. The only road bump is Stag's summoning effect. It only checks if cards they control are banished, so you can't catch them on banishing cards from their graveyard to activate effects, nor can you do so with usual graveyard hate. But we've got our fair share of banishing tools in the zombie stable, so we can get that handled. Wouldn't want to miss out and start going Stag now, would we? Daisy Crowned Lupine is a level 5 fire zombie monster with 2400 attack and 200 defense, and if you control a monster owned by your opponent, you can special summon this card from your hand. At the start of the damage step, if this card battles an opponent's monster, you can activate this effect. Banish your opponent's monster. We'll have a card in just a bit that helps fulfill our free special summon on this, but the big thing is that this card has a lot in common with the new Merciless Beast of Circuit. It wins every battle by banishing what it fights, and it doesn't care who started it, cause it's ending it. Banishing is a pretty good way to get rid of monsters, not to mention it helps to get Stag up onto the board. So go ahead, wolf down your opponent's cards. Get all Eater of Millions up in there. Crocus Crowned Strix is a level 6 wind zombie monster with 1200 attack and 2200 defense, and during your main phase, you can activate this effect by targeting this card in your banishment and one monster in your opponent's banishment to special summon both to your field, and the other monster becomes a zombie type, but their effects are negated and they can't attack. Jeez, this card is nutty. Banishing used to be the bane of zombies' existence, what with their graveyard affinity and all. But after some time, it feels like they can't get enough of it. Heck, we even have a way to handle this ourselves with Cayman to ensure we get to steal stuff, which in turn gives us the chance to special summon Lupine from hand, which can then banish something to summon Stag. It's a nice big loop that gives you more material to work with, even if you can't use the monster for any of its effects or attack power. I think the most wild thing about it is, even if it turns the monster you take into a zombie, this doesn't really come with any restrictions. So this could be a hell of an inclusion in any deck that likes to banish cards, especially their own. So while it may seem like all the debuffs applied to the stolen monster are pretty strict, I honestly don't think they're strict enough. Quavain, Hawthorn Crowned Host of Rebirth, is a level 11 dark zombie synchro monster with 3000 attack and defense, requiring... It's not listed, so I'm going to presume generic material. Each time a zombie monster is special summoned, all zombie monsters you control gain 500 attack. Once per turn, you can target a card your opponent controls and banish it, and if you do, special summon a monster from your grave and it becomes a zombie type. And during the standby phase, if this card is in your grave, you can shuffle 2 of your banished monsters into the deck to special summon this card. Good grief, this card is a powder keg just waiting to go off. The boost is not once per turn, and it doesn't consolidate the triggers if you summon more than one. So if you summon multiple zombies at the same time, the effect will trigger multiple times. It's got an onboard Book of Life, except it banishes monsters our opponent controls, not from their graveyard. So it is removal, and it can summon any monster out of our graveyard, not just zombies. Though they do take on that label afterwards. Oh, and it comes with revival by recycling your banished monsters, so no biggie. This monster is like if Baylor Drock didn't have to have its hand held the entire time you used it. Quavern is ready to handle this stuff all on its own, even if it might be a bit too powerful. I mean, if this thing really does work with everything, it is way overtuned for the battlefield, but that does make them a very excellent host. All these cards are pretty powerful, and I like how they chain together so you can see how they're all supposed to springboard off of each other. I think my only real complaint here is just how good they are in general, and how easily accessible they are on top of that. Some of these would work in general decks, zombies or no, and I feel like when you have a pool with such deep support as zombies, we've really got to put a lid on what can access that out of nowhere. So maybe we rein it in a little bit next time. Part 4. Flame Swordsman. Last on our list is a series of cards filled with a burning passion, one here to melt away the ice of winter to bring about the new season. At least, that's how Sir Knight pitched it to me. I know they just got a wave of support last year and even have some representation in the Metal Morph team, but I'm happy to see more from another member of Joey's cadre of ace monsters. Gearfried, the Searing Iron Knight, is a level 4 Fire Warrior monster with 1800 attack and 1000 defense, and if this card is added to your hand, except by drawing it, you can special summon this card. This card is is normal or special summoned, you can take a monster from your deck that mentions Flame Swordsman, except a copy of this card, and either add it to your hand or special summon it. Also, you can't special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except fire monsters. And if this card is sent to the grave, you can add a level 7 or higher Gearfried monster from your deck to your hand. So if we Rota this, or use Fighting Flame Sword, or even use Warrior Returning Alive to bring it back from the graveyard, we can just get it onto the field, which is pretty hella. And then it gets you a whole other Flame Swordsman related monster from your deck. Not to mention it floats you into a big Gearfried when it goes to the graveyard from, well, just about anywhere, which means easy Immortal Phoenix Gearfried access. As for the on-summon effect, we can grab some nasty cards. Fighting Flame Swordsman is, of course, pretty wild, getting you a related Spell or Trap card while foolishing a related monster from your deck or extra deck when it's sent to the graveyard, or get Salamandra, the Flying Flame Dragon, to search out your Salamandra Spell or Trap cards, while setting up for its own equip effect. But the one I'm most excited for is a piece of support that didn't really fit in with the original game plan. Mirage Swordsman. Or, I would be excited for it if it worked properly. Its floating effect is cool, but it can't trigger from its own self-destruct effect that trades for a monster. Like, what's going on here? Who decided that should be a thing? Especially in 2024. Gearfried the Ultimate Flame Swordmaster is a level 8 Fire Warrior fusion monster with 3000 attack and 2200 defense, requiring Gearfried the Searing Iron Knight and a Fire Dragon monster as material. While this card is equipped with an equip card, each time an opponent's card is destroyed, inflict 300 damage to your opponent for each destroyed card. If a monster you control that is Flame Swordsman, or that mentions it, battles an opponent's monster, your opponent can't activate cards or effects until the end of the damage step. Also, that opponent's monster has its effects negated during the battle phase only. When a fire monster's effect is activated on the field, except during the damage step, as a quick effect, you can destroy either all monsters your opponent controls, or all spell and trap cards they control. Yeah, you've got Raigeki or Harpy's Feather Duster, take your pick. The back row hate makes sense considering Gearfried's rampant hatred for everything in the back row, but the monster removal? Well, that comes from their unleashed form as the Swordmaster, presumably. This is a pretty solid card, not gonna lie. Because we have some burn attached to destruction, our removal cards can cause a pretty serious dent in our opponent's life points, and in battle, we're basically untouchable. But like, it feels wrong how good this card is. I mean, Ultimate Flame Swordsman is right there, the pinnacle of the deck. Then Gearfried comes along and takes its lunch money and supply of butane starter and napalm. I mean, you gotta keep the swords on fire with something, right? Salamandra Release is a quick play spell card that targets a Flame Swordsman or monster that mentions it on your field and send that monster to the graveyard. And if you do, special summon a fusion monster from your extra deck that mentions the sent monster's name, and this is treated as a fusion summon. Then equip a Fire Dragon monster that mentions Flame Swordsman from your deck, extra deck, or grave to that special summoned monster. And if any number of monsters you control that are Flame Swordsman or that mention it would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish this card from your grave instead. Well, talk about a huge fix. So, because it checks to see if the sent monster is mentioned, this is only going to really work with 3 cards. Flame Swordsman, Fighting Flame Dragon, if you can manage it, and Gearfried the Searing Iron Knight, the only main deck monster out of this selection, making it highly accessible. It basically solves everything, and because this card mentions Flame Swordsman, this is as easy to pull off as summoning Searing Knight, summon out Fighting Flame Swordsman, search release, and then blammo! The good news is that this leaves you with mostly all the cards you need to make Ultimate Flame Swordsman so that they can coexist. But the bad news is, I don't know. Guess there isn't any bad news here. It's really powerful and easy to access. It's not like it has a ton of protection, barring the one that release gives while in the graveyard, but what's a little destruction replacement now and again? If anything, they've been showing a bit too much restraint recently, so let them cut loose. Salamandra Sanctuary is a field spell card that, when activated, takes a Salamandra card from your deck, except a copy of this card, and either adds it to your hand or sends it to the graveyard. During the standby phase, you can target a monster you control that is Flame Swordsman, or that mentions it, and equip to it from your deck or graveyard an appropriate equip spell or fire monster that has an effect to equip itself to a monster you control. Good grief. So we have a Salamandra card that searches other Salamandra cards, plus puts equip cards on our Flame Swordsman related monsters. Heck, it puts monsters on our monsters, and we aren't just talking about the Flame Dragons. It can be any applicable fire monster, which means the Infernobles are up for grabs, and they've got some wild effects when attached to monsters. We're talking protection from targeting, effect destruction, drawing, no biggie. In fact, this should also equip Union monsters too, and because it doesn't say we can't special summon what we equip, you're basically just getting a free monster for special summoning other things. So the extension possibilities are off the charts. Why is it that every Sanctuary field spell that drops, I feel like I've got to fear for my life? In the Sky was fine, all it did was help keep Cloudian safe, but Dark? Terrifying. Salamangrate? My goose is cooked. Verdant? Well, that's just silly. Overall, we are pushing the boundaries of the Flame Swordsman cards, and I've no doubt they are hella powerful, but I worry it solves the deck's problems a bit too easily. And it does so by introducing a new boss monster that kind of replaces the current one, which makes me a little iffy. I'd like to hear what you all think though, but I personally prefer more elegant solutions to updating a deck, not knocking out the center wall to make room for all of Gearfried's furniture, even though the design for it is really sick. And that's all the cards I've got for this month's showcase. There were some real bangers this month, and I had to leave a few of them off so this video didn't take forever to produce. So make sure to follow me over on my Twitch channel, because near the end of the month I'll have my custom card review stream, where I'm going to go through all the cards that were submitted and give them my patented Nova scaling evaluation. And it's not too late for you to join in too. Pledge to my Patreon at $5 or above, submit your cards, and you too can have them shown off for the world to see. But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Which of these was your favorite? And what kind of cards would you have submitted for the spring collection? Let me know down below, and if you haven't already, please be sure to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already, click on one of my videos in the suggested feed to help me show up in your homepage, and be sure to share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales that even come with their own lore, and save 5% on your order by using the coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. It was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders, Upstairs Media, and Cernite JCB, Nebula Navigators, 3rd Dynasty, 50 Gigabytes, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Ancient Wizard, Andrew Newman, Battle Axe, Kane Senpai, Charlie Mercury, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Comrade Copperbottom, Eric, Frankie, Garland Chaos, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Carp, Marion James E. Picata, Mike Cook, Millennia Asta, Muse Clark, Neon Yaminair, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Bat Boos, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sonic 21 Blast, The Critic of Innocence, Thievery Coast and the Wizard Moose, Cosmic Crusaders Ally Vania, Animasta, Anthrak, Baden Von Titty Sprinkles, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Chaz Ghost, Chris B, Dr. Entity RIP, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Inblink, Kale the Dragon, Lobomaru 02, Manga Pages, Natiel Lee Alexander, Nitrummo, Not Al Gore, Nyx, Obsidian, Pombo, Rain, Rhyme Kairos, Schwenny, Shizuka Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Sphilia, Stephen Williamson, The Legendary Raven, The Phantom Knights of Shitted Pants, The Gene, Tiger X2476, Weasel King of Weaseltown, Zaldreka and Zero Day Nova, as well as all the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits and other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you would check out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining here as a YouTube member. Even a single dollar means the world to me and honestly helps me a lot more than YouTube ad rev.